She was the voice that made America stop and listen. With just a single note, Linda Ronstadt could bring an entire stadium to silence or lift a broken heart back to life. From the sweet ache of Blue Bayou to the fiery defiance of You're No Good, her voice was more than music. It was memory, culture, and emotion wrapped in velvet. But then one day that voice disappeared. At 79 years old, Linda lives a quiet life far from the spotlight that once followed her every step. What happened to the woman whose sound once ruled the charts and crossed every genre line in the music world? This documentary takes you from the roaring heights of her fame to the silent strength of her present. It is a journey of talent, heartbreak, reinvention, and resilience. This is not just about a voice lost. It is about a legacy that never faded. The voice that captivated America. There are voices that entertain, and then there are voices that define generations. Linda Ronstadt belonged to the second category. When she sang, it was not just a performance, it was a spell. From the very first time her voice crackled through the speakers of American radios in the late 1960s, people knew something extraordinary had arrived. Her tone was pure, emotional, and unfiltered. She could move from rock to country to Latin ballads with ease, making each genre feel like it was made for her. At her peak in the 1970s and 80s, Linda Ronstadt was not just a singer, she was a sensation. In those early years, her performances were electric. Audiences packed concert halls, stadiums, and outdoor venues, waiting for that moment when she would step onto the stage. The lights would dim, the crowd would hush, and then Linda would appear, often barefoot, dressed simply, letting her voice do the talking. The footage from this era is breathtaking. There she is on stage at the Hollywood Bowl, effortlessly belting out You're No Good while the crowd roars. Then another clip rolls, showing her backstage laughing with bandmates, her presence both powerful and unpretentious. In those moments, it was clear. She was not trying to become a star, she already was one. Her music was everywhere. In diners, teenagers fed coins into jukeboxes just to hear, When Will I Be Loved? On late-night television, she appeared on talk shows and variety programs, often seated with her guitar, ready to sing live with no filter or studio polish. Her album covers filled record store shelves. Her face smiled from magazine racks, and yet, for all the fame, there remained something mysterious about her. She was fiercely private, rarely giving interviews, and when she did, she spoke plainly, always bringing the conversation back to the music. As the years rolled on, her voice did not falter. In fact, it grew richer, more textured. Her fans grew up with her, and so did her songs. The young women who once danced in dorm rooms to her rock anthems now played her lullabies for their own children. Her voice became a part of American life, stitched into the fabric of birthdays, breakups, and Sunday mornings. Then one day, that voice was gone. The story of Linda Ronstadt is not just about the songs she sang, it is about the sudden silence that followed. The shift from sold-out tours and flashing cameras to a quiet life in Tucson left many wondering. What happened to the woman who once stood shoulder to shoulder with the greatest voices in music history? Today, outside her home in Tucson, the air is still. Birds chirp in the background as the camera gently zooms in on a modest home nestled among desert cacti. There are no paparazzi, no limousines waiting, just peace. But within that stillness lies a powerful question. Why did one of the most celebrated voices in America suddenly disappear from the stage? What did Linda know before the rest of the world noticed? This chapter sets the tone for everything to come. It is a beginning rooted not in glitter and spectacle, but in raw truth. Linda Ronstadt's story is not just about fame. It is about identity, courage, and how even the brightest light can flicker when life shifts unexpectedly. Her voice may no longer ring out across stadiums, but her silence speaks volumes, and we are about to listen. The Golden Years, Rise to Stardom. Before the world knew her as the queen of genre-defying music, Linda Ronstadt was a young girl growing up in the wide-open spaces of Tucson, Arizona. Born in 1946 to a Mexican-American family deeply rooted in music and tradition, Linda's early life was filled with sound. Her father, Gilbert Ronstadt, ran a hardware store and played guitar. Her mother, Ruth Mary, was a homemaker with a love for classical piano. Together, their home became a quiet incubator for the artistic spirit that would later take the world by storm. Linda grew up surrounded by the harmonies of mariachi, the melodies of big band jazz, and the raw energy of early rock and roll. As a teenager, she joined her siblings in performing folk and country songs locally. But the moment that shifted everything came when she left Tucson for Los Angeles in the mid-1960s. There, she joined forces with two fellow musicians and formed a folk rock trio called the Stone Ponies. They played at coffee houses and small clubs, slowly gaining a following. In 1967, the group scored a breakthrough hit with Different Drum, a song written by Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. The single soared on the charts and immediately positioned Linda as the standout voice of the group. Her haunting performance on that track signaled that a major new artist had arrived. The success of Different Drum opened doors for Linda, and by the early 1970s, she had launched her solo career. It was a bold move for a young woman in a male-dominated music industry, but Linda was fearless. She had something no one could deny, an unmistakable voice and an uncompromising sense of self. Her solo albums, beginning with Hand Sewn, Homegrown, and Silk Purse, showcased her ability to blend rock, country, and folk into something new. But it was her 1974 album, Heart Like a Wheel, that truly catapulted her into superstardom. With hits like You're No Good, When Will I Be Loved, and It Does Not Matter Anymore, Linda dominated the charts. She became the first female artist to have 3 consecutive platinum albums. Her records flew off shelves, her concerts sold out across the country, and critics praised her vocal agility and emotional depth. She moved seamlessly between genres, refusing to be boxed into a single label. One year she was performing rock anthems with electric guitars. The next she was belting country ballads or experimenting with pop standards. Music executives at the time admitted they had rarely seen an artist with her level of control over her image and sound. She chose her songs carefully, often rewriting arrangements to fit her style. She worked closely with producers like Peter Asher, shaping each record into something that felt personal and distinct. Behind the scenes, she was a perfectionist, rehearsing tirelessly and pushing her band to new heights. On stage, she was magnetic. Her voice was clear and commanding, but her stage presence remained humble. She often stood still at the microphone, letting the music speak louder than any theatrics. By the late 1970s, Linda had become one of the most successful female recording artists in the world. Her albums consistently topped charts, and she appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone more than once. Still, she never sought celebrity for its own sake. Fame to her was simply a byproduct of doing what she loved, and what she loved was making music that moved people. The rise of Linda Ronstadt was not a fluke. It was the result of talent, hard work, and a deep connection to her heritage and musical roots. In a time when the industry often tried to shape women into products, Linda remained true to herself. She was not just a singer, she was an artist, and America had fallen in love with her voice. At the height of fame. By the end of the 1970s, Linda Ronstadt was no longer just a rising star. She was a powerhouse. Her voice filled arenas, her image graced magazine covers, and her records became soundtracks to the lives of millions. This was the era when she truly became a cultural icon. Her talent was undeniable, but what made Linda unforgettable was her ability to stand at the center of the spotlight without ever losing her authenticity. The music industry watched in awe as Linda collected Grammy Awards and platinum plaques like they were souvenirs. She earned multiple Grammy wins, including Best Female Pop Vocal Performance for songs that showcased both her strength and vulnerability. Her albums consistently sold millions of copies, a rare feat for a female artist in that time. The press hailed her as the most successful female rock singer of the decade, but she seemed uninterested in fame for its own sake. She never played the part of the diva. Instead, she remained grounded, fiercely protective of her creative control, and refreshingly uninterested in the glitter of stardom. Her personal life, however, attracted almost as much attention as her music. In the late 1970s, Linda's high-profile relationship with California Governor Jerry Brown drew headlines nationwide. Their romance captured public fascination. She, the reigning queen of rock. He, a serious political figure with presidential ambitions. Together, they became one of the most talked-about couples in the country. But true to her nature, Linda never let her love life define her. She made it clear that she would not be reduced to gossip fodder. For her, the music always came first. Even as the tabloids buzzed, Linda was expanding her reach beyond albums and concerts. She shocked the entertainment world by stepping onto the Broadway stage in 1981, starring in The Pirates of Penzance. Her performance was met with critical acclaim, Audiences saw a different side of her, one that was theatrical and playfully operatic. She held her own alongside veteran stage actors, proving that her talent extended far beyond the recording studio. The show was later adapted into a film version, further cementing her reputation as a versatile performer willing to take creative risks. Perhaps one of her most celebrated projects during this time was her collaboration with fellow legends Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. Together, they recorded the now iconic Trio album in 1987. The harmony between their voices was nothing short of magical. The album blended country, folk, and gospel influences and became both a critical and commercial success. It won awards, topped charts, and introduced a new generation of listeners to the deep emotional power of vocal harmony. Linda's ability to collaborate with other strong artists without overpowering them spoke volumes about her generosity as a performer. More than anything, this era defined Linda's impact on the broader culture. She was not just a voice on the radio. She was a symbol of independence, versatility, and strength. Young women looked up to her not only because she could sing any song and make it her own, but because she navigated an industry dominated by men with quiet defiance and grace. She showed that it was possible to take creative risks, maintain artistic integrity, and still top the charts. Footage from her concerts during this period reveals the full scope of her charisma. Her performances were powerful without being flashy. She did not rely on elaborate sets or choreography. She simply sang and people listened. Fans would wait for hours just to catch a glimpse of her or to hear her sing one of their favorites live. Her voice could fill a stadium and yet still sound like it was singing just for you. At this height of fame, Linda Ronstadt stood as proof that true talent needs no gimmick. She had become a legend in real time. Her music moved hearts, crossed boundaries, and created moments that would echo for decades to come. The unexpected turn, exploring new territories. By the late 1980s, Linda Ronstadt had already conquered the charts, the stage, and the hearts of millions. She could have stayed on the path of commercial success, releasing familiar rock and pop hits and continuing to fill stadiums. But Linda had never been one to play it safe. She was driven not just by popularity, but by a deep artistic curiosity. At the height of her fame, she took a bold step away from what the industry expected and toward what her soul was calling her to explore. This unexpected turn began with her decision to embrace the music of her heritage. In 1987, Linda released Canciones de mi Padre, a full-length album of traditional Mexican mariachi music. It was a tribute to her roots, honoring the songs her father used to sing and the culture that shaped her upbringing in Tucson. The album was recorded entirely in Spanish and featured authentic arrangements performed by some of the most respected mariachi musicians in the world. It was a project of love and personal identity. Industry executives were cautious. A Mexican album sung entirely in Spanish was not considered a commercial bet in the American market at the time, but Linda pushed forward, refusing to dilute the sound or the emotion of the music. When the album was released, the response was overwhelming. Not only did Canciones de mi Padre become the best-selling non-English language album in American history at the time, but it also introduced millions of listeners to the rich tradition of Mexican folk music. Linda did not just record songs. She opened a cultural door and invited the world in. The album won a Grammy Award and was followed by stunning stage performances filled with color, emotion, and the deep passion of her ancestry. Dressed in traditional Mexican attire, backed by full mariachi ensembles, Linda sang with a sense of purpose that went beyond entertainment. These were songs of love, loss, longing, and celebration. And in delivering them, she showed once again that her voice was a bridge between worlds. Around the same time, Linda began to explore even more unfamiliar ground. She ventured into the world of classical music and opera, recording a series of albums that included standards and arias. Albums like Cry Like a Rainstorm, Howl Like the Wind, and Dedicated to the One I Love revealed her interest in vocal experimentation and musical complexity. She sang with full orchestras, collaborated with classical composers, and brought an emotional depth to these works that surprised even seasoned critics. Some fans were confused by these choices. Others admired her for being unafraid to follow her artistic instincts. Linda was clear about one thing. She did not want to spend her life repeating the same formula. To her, staying creatively alive meant stretching into new spaces, even if it meant risking commercial momentum. She often said she never felt fully comfortable in the world of rock and roll, even while dominating it. Her heart was always searching for music that told deeper stories and required a different kind of discipline. This period of reinvention was not easy. Moving away from the mainstream came with challenges. There were fewer radio plays, and some critics questioned her direction. But Linda never backed down. In interviews, she spoke passionately about the need to honor where you come from and to embrace the fullness of your artistic voice. She understood that growth sometimes meant stepping into unfamiliar rooms, even when no one else followed at first. In choosing to explore new territories, Linda Ronstadt did something very rare. She proved that success was not just about charts and awards, it was about truth. Her journey through Mexican ballads and classical arias was a testament to her fearless spirit and the integrity that had always been at the heart of her music. The first sign something was wrong. By the early 2000s, Linda Ronstadt had already reshaped the boundaries of popular music. She had sung rock anthems, operatic arias, country ballads, and traditional Mexican songs. Her voice had traveled across continents and cultures, always finding a home in the hearts of those who listened. But behind the scenes, something was beginning to change. It started with small shifts. Nothing dramatic at first, just subtle clues that something was no longer quite right. Linda began to notice that her voice was not behaving the way it always had. She struggled to hit notes that once came effortlessly. During rehearsals and performances, she felt an unfamiliar tension in her throat. Songs that were once second nature required more concentration and physical effort. At first, she thought it was fatigue or the natural aging process. After all, she had been singing professionally for over 4 decades. But deep down, something felt different. Fans attending her shows noticed it too. Some commented on the softer tone of her voice or the way she sometimes avoided her highest notes. Still, her performances remained emotional and engaging. The power of her interpretation and presence never faded. But Linda, always a perfectionist, felt the difference more sharply than anyone else could. She began to worry. Medical consultations followed. She met with vocal coaches, ear, nose, and throat specialists, and neurologists. The initial answers were vague. Some suggested it might be the early signs of vocal strain. Others believed it was related to aging or stress. There were no definitive answers, and the uncertainty only deepened her frustration. Linda had always relied on her voice as her most trusted companion. Now it was becoming unpredictable. In interviews during this time, she was cautious. She did not speak openly about her vocal challenges, preferring to focus on her music and her personal projects. But those close to her could see the emotional toll it was taking. Singing had always been more than a career. It was her identity, her gift. To feel it slipping away was like watching the lights dim in a room she had lived in her entire life. She began performing less frequently. Tours became shorter and studio sessions grew more difficult. Some recordings were delayed or canceled altogether. Her once tireless energy for live performance began to wane. Friends and collaborators recall moments when she would quietly step away from a microphone and shake her head, frustrated that the sound did not match the vision she held in her mind. During this period, Linda spent more time in her home in Tucson, surrounded by family and the peaceful rhythm of the desert. She found comfort in books, in cooking, and in long conversations with old friends. But there was also a quiet sadness that followed her, a sense that the part of her that had always been strongest was now becoming fragile. She continued to record and release music when she could, but it was becoming clear to those around her that the chapter of her career defined by live performance was slowly closing. Rare interviews from this time show a woman who is reflective and honest. She speaks about the importance of listening to your body and honoring its signals. She does not express bitterness, only a quiet recognition that something was changing. For Linda Ronstadt, the first signs that something was wrong did not arrive with a crash. They crept in softly, like a familiar song being slowly turned down. The audience may not have noticed right away, but Linda did, and she knew in the deepest part of her soul that her voice was beginning to fade. The devastating diagnosis. In the year 2013, Linda Ronstadt shared a revelation that sent shockwaves through the music world. After years of silence and speculation about her fading presence in the public eye, she finally told the world why she could no longer sing. The diagnosis was Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological disorder that affects movement, balance, and speech. For someone whose life had been shaped and defined by her voice, the news was devastating. She revealed that the disease had actually been affecting her for years before the official diagnosis. She had experienced symptoms as early as 2006 but struggled to find answers. Doctors initially thought she had shoulder problems or other less serious conditions. It was only after years of tests and increasing difficulty with everyday tasks that the truth came to light. By the time she received the correct diagnosis, her singing voice was already gone. Linda described the moment with heartbreaking clarity. She explained that she had not sung in years because her vocal cords no longer responded the way they once had. It was not just about hitting notes. It was about breath control, muscle coordination, and the subtle neuromuscular dance that makes singing possible. All of it had been slowly stripped away. She could no longer even sing in the shower, something that had once brought her joy. The silence was total. Medical experts have explained how Parkinson's disease impacts the brain and body. It is caused by the gradual loss of dopamine-producing neurons in the brain, which in turn affects motor skills and muscle control. For singers, this means the muscles required for vocal support, tone control, and breath regulation become unreliable. It can also affect facial expressions, posture, and energy levels. In Linda's case, the damage had already reached a point where even speaking clearly required effort. Despite the painful reality, Linda faced the diagnosis with remarkable honesty. She did not hide from the truth. In interviews, she spoke openly about her limitations and her decision to retire from performing. She did not ask for sympathy. She simply told the story as it was. There was sadness in her voice, but also strength. She had made peace with the fact that her gift had been taken from her. What remained was her legacy and her will to keep living meaningfully. Fans around the world reacted with shock and sorrow. For decades, Linda Ronstadt had been the voice that healed, moved, and empowered. The idea that she could no longer sing was difficult to accept. Tributes poured in from musicians, industry veterans, and admirers. Many described the diagnosis as the end of an era. Others focused on her bravery in sharing such a personal struggle so publicly. Close friends spoke about how Linda handled the news privately. They said she never allowed the diagnosis to define her. Though she grieved the loss of her voice, she also turned her energy toward learning more about the disease and raising awareness. She became involved in advocacy for Parkinson's research, helping others understand the condition that had changed her life so profoundly. The end of her performing career was not marked by a farewell concert or public tribute. It was a quiet retreat into a new reality. For someone who had once commanded the attention of the world with a single note, the silence that followed was deeply symbolic. Linda Ronstadt did not exit the stage with spectacle. She left with grace. The devastating diagnosis may have taken her voice, but it did not take her spirit. Linda's story became not just about the loss of a gift, but the strength of a woman who had always followed her own path. Even in silence, her legacy continued to sing. Life after the diagnosis. After Linda Ronstadt publicly revealed her Parkinson's diagnosis in 2013, the world shifted its gaze from the spotlight of her past achievements to the quiet strength of her present. The woman who had once filled stadiums and dominated radio waves now lived a simpler life, far away from flashing cameras and roaring applause. Yet even in the stillness of her retirement, Linda's presence remained powerful. She settled in Tucson, Arizona, returning to the desert landscape where her story had first begun. The wide skies and warm earth gave her a sense of grounding. The house she lived in was unpretentious, surrounded by native plants and shaded by trees. There were no signs of celebrity on the surface, only the rhythm of a peaceful daily routine. Friends and family visited regularly, and she kept herself engaged with books, films, and thoughtful conversation. Linda had always been curious and introspective, and those traits only deepened in this new chapter of her life. Though she could no longer sing, she had not lost her voice in other ways. In the same year as her diagnosis, Linda released her memoir titled Simple Dreams. The book traced her musical journey with honesty and reflection. She shared stories about her childhood in Tucson, the early years in Los Angeles, and the heights of her fame without glamorizing or exaggerating. Readers were struck by her candor. She did not dwell on gossip or fame. Instead, she focused on the music, the work, and the people who helped shape her art. Her writing revealed the same clarity and sincerity that had always defined her songs. In interviews following the release of the memoir, Linda remained open about her condition. She discussed the physical changes she faced, including difficulty walking and the tremors that affected her hands. But she also spoke with humor and resilience. She admitted that there were good days and bad ones, moments of frustration and moments of peace. What mattered most to her was staying engaged with life and using her platform to help others understand the reality of living with Parkinson's disease. Advocacy became a quiet but important part of Linda's new identity. She supported Parkinson's research and participated in awareness campaigns. Though she was no longer performing, her presence at these events carried enormous weight. Seeing someone of her stature speak openly about a condition that is often misunderstood brought comfort to many others living with similar diagnoses. She reminded people that even in the face of physical decline, dignity and purpose could endure. Linda found strength in her personal relationships. She remained close to her children, whom she had adopted in the 1990s. Her role as a mother gave her daily motivation and joy. Friends described her as witty, wise, and deeply engaged in conversation. She would talk about politics, art, and culture with the same sharpness she had always shown. Music was still part of her life, too. She listened often, revisiting old favorites and discovering new artists. Though she could not sing along anymore, she still felt the emotions each song stirred. Rare public appearances reminded fans of the quiet grace she carried. In 2019, she participated in a documentary titled Linda Ronstadt, The Sound of My Voice. The film traced her journey from childhood to stardom and through her retirement, earning critical praise and rekindling appreciation for her legacy. Linda did not narrate the film in the traditional sense, but her interviews offered profound insight into how she viewed her life and career. Life after the diagnosis was not what Linda Ronstadt had envisioned, but true to her spirit, she met it with honesty, humor, and heart. She showed the world that even without a singing voice, she could still be heard. And in that quiet strength, her fans found something just as powerful as the music that once filled the air: legacy and impact. Linda Ronstadt's voice may have fallen silent, but her influence echoes louder than ever. Across generations and genres, her legacy lives on in the voices of countless artists who cite her as a foundational inspiration. For many female performers, she was not just a role model. She was proof that talent, integrity, and independence could coexist in a music industry often shaped by pressure and conformity. Her groundbreaking career set a new standard for what it meant to be versatile. Linda did not just master one style. She conquered them all. From rock and country to Latin ballads and operatic standards, she challenged the idea that artists had to remain in one lane to be successful. This fearless crossing of musical borders helped open the doors for artists like Sheryl Crow, K.D. Lang, and Bonnie Raitt. Younger stars such as Brandi Carlile and Maren Morris have also spoken of how Linda's bold choices helped shape their own journeys. One of the most powerful aspects of Linda's legacy lies in her cultural identity. As a Mexican-American woman, she brought visibility to Latino heritage in a time when the mainstream music industry offered little space for it. Her decision to release Canciones de mi Padre, sung entirely in Spanish, was more than a creative risk. It was a cultural milestone. That album did not just reach the top of Latin charts. It became the best-selling non-English language album in American music history at the time. Through it, Linda honored her roots while educating and inspiring audiences across backgrounds. Her pride in her heritage helped pave the way for greater diversity in popular music. Linda's influence also extended into how female artists saw themselves. In an era where image often overshadowed substance, she insisted on being known for her voice and her artistry. She chose her own songs, hired her own producers, and resisted the industry's attempts to mold her into a predictable product. Her presence on the cover of Rolling Stone, not as a carefully packaged idol but as a woman in control of her own story, inspired others to seek the same creative freedom. Her accolades reflect the magnitude of her impact. Linda has earned multiple Grammy Awards, an Emmy, and countless other honors. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014, an emotional moment that recognized her decades of influence. Though she could not attend the ceremony due to her illness, the event featured heartfelt tributes from artists like Stevie Nicks and Carrie Underwood. her peers spoke not only of her voice, but of her courage, her intelligence, and her ability to shape the very fabric of modern music. Beyond the awards, Linda's influence can be felt in the very structure of American music history. She helped define the sound of the 70s and 80s, and her collaborations with other legends only deepened that mark. The trio album with Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris is still considered one of the most important collaborative projects in country music. The honesty, harmony, and emotional range of that record set a new bar for what female artists could achieve together. Linda Ronstadt's story is not just about records sold or awards won. It is about the integrity of an artist who never stopped listening to her own heart. She remained true to herself, even when the path forward was uncertain. And in doing so, she gave others permission to do the same. Her voice may have gone quiet, but the impact of that voice continues to shape and uplift. She remains a towering figure in the history of music, not just for what she accomplished, but for how she carried herself through every triumph and every trial. Her legacy is not fading. It is still unfolding in every voice that dares to be honest, bold, and free. Present-day Linda at 79. At 79 years old, Linda Ronstadt lives far from the noise that once defined her world. The stages are behind her, the concert lights long faded, but her presence remains undeniable. In her Tucson home, surrounded by desert beauty and familiar comforts, she embraces a quieter rhythm. Each day is approached with grace, honesty, and the quiet wisdom of someone who has seen both the summit and the silence that follows. Her health continues to be shaped by Parkinson's disease, which affects her mobility and speech more than ever before. Simple tasks now require assistance. She sometimes uses a wheelchair, and her hands no longer move with the same ease that once held a microphone or strummed a guitar. Yet those close to her say that her spirit remains vibrant. She still smiles, still laughs, still remembers the details of her long and remarkable journey with astonishing clarity. Though she no longer sings, her mind is still deeply engaged. She fills her days with books, documentaries, and deep conversation. Linda has always been a thinker, someone who explored beyond the surface of things. She remains intensely curious about the world. Her interests range from politics to literature, and her friends describe her as a passionate conversationalist who challenges ideas and listens just as much as she speaks. Her home is modest but filled with the history of a life well lived. Photographs from different eras line the shelves, each telling a story of a moment, a song, a friendship, a victory. Family continues to be a central source of comfort and joy. Linda adopted 2 children in the 1990s, and now she enjoys the richness of being a mother to grown children. Her relationship with them has deepened in this chapter of life. They visit often, bringing companionship and lightness. Her bond with them remains one of her most treasured accomplishments. It was never the fame or the applause that gave her meaning. It was always the people she loved and the music she shared. In rare moments when she appears publicly, fans are reminded of the fierce intelligence and humor that always made Linda more than just a voice. She has spoken about how Parkinson's has forced her to let go of vanity and focus on what truly matters. She no longer chases recognition or visibility. What she values now is peace, reflection, and presence. These days, joy comes in small forms. A well-written book, a conversation with an old friend, a favorite song playing in the background. When asked in interviews about how she views her life now, Linda speaks without bitterness. She says she has no regrets. She made the music she wanted to make. She followed her instincts. She did not bend to fit trends. That sense of fulfillment shines through her words. Though her body may be slowing down, her heart is full. She often expresses gratitude for the journey, the people who stood beside her, and the fans who still hold her music close. Photos taken in recent years show Linda seated in her sunlit living room, wrapped in a soft shawl, her eyes bright with recognition. Time may have changed the physical form, but it has not dimmed the power of who she is. In those quiet spaces, she is not the performer anymore. She is the woman behind the voice, strong, grounded, at peace. Linda Ronstadt at 79 is not a fading star. She is a steady flame, a presence that reminds us all that beauty, courage, and influence are not measured by the volume of our voice, but by the life we lead when the music stops, and in her silence, she is still singing. the voice lives on. Although Linda Ronstadt no longer graces the stage or records new songs, her voice continues to live on in ways that feel both intimate and monumental. For many, hearing her sing is not just a memory, it is a present comfort. Her recordings remain in steady rotation across the world on streaming platforms, vinyl turntables, car radios, and in the quiet of kitchens where people sing along to the soundtrack of their lives. Her voice, crystal clear and emotionally fearless, still carries the power to stir hearts and ignite nostalgia. Decades after her final performance, Linda remains one of the most enduring vocalists in American music history. Her greatest performances have become a form of cultural inheritance. Songs like Blue Bayou, You're No Good, Desperado, and Long, Long Time are passed from one generation to the next. Parents introduce their children to her music, and young artists continue to study her phrasing, her emotional depth, and her vocal range. Her interpretations were never imitations. She made every song her own. That uniqueness is what continues to captivate listeners. It was never just about hitting the notes. It was about meaning every single word. Recent years have brought renewed recognition for Linda's influence. The documentary Linda Ronstadt, The Sound of My Voice, released in 2019, reintroduced her legacy to a wider audience. The film received critical acclaim and won a Grammy Award for Best Music Film. Through archival footage and interviews, it painted a vivid picture of a woman who defied expectations and lived on her own terms. It reminded the world that behind the platinum albums and sold-out tours was a fiercely intelligent and principled artist. Tributes continue to pour in from contemporary musicians. Stars like Adele, Kelly Clarkson, and Norah Jones have all acknowledged Linda's impact on their own careers. They speak of her bravery in crossing genres, her vulnerability in performance, and her quiet refusal to be molded by industry pressures. In many ways, Linda Ronstadt paved the way for female artists to demand creative freedom. She did not conform to trends. She created her own. Her music is also frequently used in films and television, introducing her timeless voice to new listeners. When her songs appear in emotional scenes, they do more than set the tone. They deepen the story. Her voice carries a weight that makes ordinary moments feel profound. It is a reminder that great art does not fade. It evolves, finding new meaning as the world changes around it. Even as Parkinson's disease silences her ability to sing, Linda continues to express herself. She remains involved in Parkinson's advocacy, lending her name and story to help raise awareness and funding for research. She may no longer perform, but she continues to impact lives, proving that her influence extends far beyond the microphone. In the final frames of her story, the spotlight softens, but it never fades. Instead, it settles gently around her, illuminating the quiet dignity with which she now lives. The credits roll not on a life interrupted, but on a legacy completed with grace. The end of her singing career did not signal the end of her voice. Her recordings are living proof of what it means to sing with soul, with truth, and with fearless conviction. For those who listen, Linda's voice is still very much alive. It lives in the echo of a love song, in the cry of a heartbreak ballad, in the proud rhythm of her cultural roots. The woman who once brought stadiums to their feet now brings tears to the eyes of listeners sitting in quiet rooms. Her voice lives on, and it always will. What's your view on Linda's life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.